Hi, it's Todd from Todd's Workshop and Todd Cutler here, and I have got a making film for you doing every single part of the metalwork on this scabbard here. Firstly, just like to apologise for the sound quality in the film. It's not everything it could be, but the content is fantastic and I hope you enjoy it. So when I make scabbard fittings, I generally start with a finished core covered in leather. And I partially work from patterns and I partially work over the top of this. So the first thing is to cut the paper pattern pieces. So there's nothing clever about this, I just cut them roughly parallel, roughly the kind of width I want. So just wrap that around and then mark off so there is going to be an overlap. What I don't do, and what they mostly didn't do at the time, is fit the pieces butt to butt. So there's enough slack here that there's about a 5mm overlap between the two pieces. We'll just check that, and that's looking good. Chape one is a bit too long, so I'm just going to crop that off now. And now it's time to transfer the pattern pieces onto sheet brass. And now it's time to cut them out. So our major pieces are cut, but while I've got the guillotine out, I'm going to add some decorative strips to these, so I'm going to cut those now at the same time. And then the last bit are going to be the hanging loops, where we actually put the suspension rings. So I've got a slightly thicker brass for this, and I'm going to cut those and get them ready as well. I have all my pieces, and it's time to deburr them and anneal them. So it's important now that you keep your hands and the components as clean and as burr-free as possible, because obviously you're going to be sliding stuff up and down on the leather. If the leather is light coloured, it's especially a problem. What you can do, and I sometimes do, is I cut a bit of scrap leather and I work over the wooden core with that, and then when that's all finished, then I stitch up the outer. But this, today, I'm just going straight over the leather. So the first thing is to position the top one centrally, because this scabbard is quite diamond section. So I'm just getting a central mark there and a central mark here. I do everything a little bit freehand. Now I want to bend that. My vise is not quite deep enough, so I'm just going to pop off and put a little bend in a vise. Back in a moment. You can see from that that the bend I've put in more or less matches the facets on the scabbard. And I'm just going to put a little marker here, and that is where I'm going to first do my starts of my first bends. Now I cannot tell you how to do this. This I could show you, and you're just going to have to learn if you want to do it. It is experience, but you do not just go straight for a bend. You do it little bit by little bit, and you keep checking what the fit is like. I'm also going to mark the top so that I can get them back on again. So as you can see, we're just starting to get the bends in now. And I can see I'm going to go inside of those marks that I made and just do another little bend. We're getting a bit tighter now. And I'm just going to go for one more bend, and then we're going to move into freehand hitting. Now the first stage is to carry on bending it around the core here. The brass is quite thin, it's been annealed, it's quite soft. I'm not in much danger of damaging the core. But if I brought that all the way down, that central ridge would get pulled over. So I have to swap sides and do it stage by stage on both sides. Now the central ridge is more or less central. Not quite, so I'm going to try and pull it that way a bit by closing this one. Not big taps, all very gentle. And then I'm just going to close that back one now. As we're going to get it. So what I'm going to do now is just make sure it does actually come off the scabbard. And it does not. Now that is not abnormal, so I'm just going to open that tiny bit. And it should now come off. And it does. So what that means is I just have to watch for that whilst I'm making it. So now we've got this horrible and clearly not good flare out of the two wings with these fantastic Knipex parallel action pliers, adjustable wrenches, I don't know what you call them, but they are just brilliant. So the piece has been annealed and we should be able to get a final fit. And I've now just got to tap it, as I did before, into position. So everything's down now, and I just need to make sure it goes on and off. And it does, it's tight, but there's no problem with that. So I'm going to get that into position now. A 0.5 millimeter difference in where this position is, and it will not fit. So what I'm going to do now is just scribe a line where I want this overlap to lie. So when I solder it, I'll clamp it into position, and that will get us the exact measurement that we need. So you've got to be careful with brass, obviously, to not overheat it. And I've been careful to align that scrape mark. So I'm just getting a bit of heat onto the inside, because otherwise that underneath sheet doesn't heat so well. Let's see if it fits. And this should go on, not quite, but nearly perfectly. Oh, okay, it goes on perfectly. So there we are, right at the top there. So the midpoint hanger is just a repeat of the first one. So our second piece is done. Soldering's a bit messy, the angles are a bit off, doesn't matter, you'll find out later. So my mark is about here, it should get pretty tight by the time I get up there. I'm about 1 centimetre short of my mark. Just going to tap that down and that'll run it up just a little bit more. So the first one's on, I'm just sliding the second central one on, up to position, and there you have it. And now it's time for the chape. It's a bit different. So this time I'm just going to lay it on and scribe the two outlines that I'm going to put my first bends into, because you want it to be progressive. So I've bent to the lines of the chape now. I'm just going to put a couple more in, one inside, one outside. Now all that bending is done by hand. It's not like I'm Superman. The material is thin enough that you can do it. But you can see now that it's shaped relatively closely to the tip of the scabbard. Now I have to stop and start hitting with a hammer. So if I hit too much like that, nothing will happen. If I hit like that, the wrong thing. So I have to hit an angle where you can hear the sound, it changes. As ever, have a look at the fit. The best of doing now is just move the chape just a little further down the scabbard. When you close it up, you can drive it on and it will start to seat. I can now keep the scabbard in place. Again, swapping sides, or the whole shape is going to get ruined. See, there's a bigger gap here than there is here, and it's loose. So I'm going to close that now, and the best way to do that is to use one of the handy lumps and bumps on your vise. So we're closing here. At the end, it's a bit harder to close. You don't have to worry about this being circular. We can make it circular really easily later on. It's looking pretty good. I'm just going to close it a little bit here, gently. I've got this seam closed up well enough for soldering to about here. And you can see it's been worked too much and it's got a bit of spring back. So I'm just going to anneal it and then tap it back down again. And there it is. Let's see if it fits. So this chape here goes on, it's a nice fit, but I've cut away the edges of the leather. So this is now floppy. So what I'm going to do is not cheating, it's reality. I'm just sticking a little bit of thick super glue under here, just to hold it down and stop it being flappy. And so everything fits nicely now, and there are our 3 fittings, but it's time to start cleaning them up. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to level them. So obviously we're a little bit rough in terms of finish, but also rough in terms of level, and that angle there I can tell you is going downwards. So we're going to start cleaning all of that up to make them square, to make them fit properly. So we're going to start with the chape and put on a decorative strip, which I will solder into place. I'm just going to hand bend it around a little bit further down the fitting than I want. And the reason for that is that you can then bring it up and it helps jam it and close the gaps. Some of the excess. So I'm just going to very carefully close that bend a little bit by squeezing it, and that one a little bit. Don't worry that these are sticking up, because we'll grind them off after. Same procedure, but this time we've got the centre ridge on this component. I'm just using my Snipex to bend on the bottom side, which is a little narrower, holding it just around the ridge, bringing that down, transferring it. A little bit of a gap, so I'm just going to close that, and I'm going to bend the central angle a tiny bit. Brilliant! Basically somewhere close to a perfect fit. Then we're going to do the last one, and the gap, as you hopefully can see if I obscure my lovely face, is pretty small. So we can solder those up. Time to clean them up. They're all filed and back to the belt sander to smooth it down, blend it, and get rid of some of the heavier scratches. So we have all 3 pieces fitting nicely on the scabbard, so we're going to add a bit more decoration now onto the actual fittings themselves. So all the pieces have these scribe lines on them now. Now they give me a guide for filing, because at the moment they'd look horrible, I can't really do that. So I'm going to file them, clean them up, straighten them, make them into a nice groove. These are all grooved in. I'm not going to polish them up yet, because I'm going to put a little bit of rounded dagging on both ends of these. So I'm just going to mark out again, as ever, freehand. I could scribe it in, but it would just leave me a scratch that I then got to remove. I'm now going to use this tiny little grinding disc on the end of the fordham in a very inappropriate way, but it works. All done, and back to the polish. There we have it. So a really annoying dent that was in there has just been masked by putting a perforation hole through, which you see that kind of thing on chapes and fittings, so I don't have a problem with it. Deburring so it doesn't scratch up the leather. And here we are. Top fitting, mid fitting, and then chape. So the next thing to do is to put the hangers on. So let's start bending them up. So I have 3 pieces of flat sheet brass like this, about 1.5mm. Just going to bend them, clamp it up in the vise, pushing the drill bit down, not pinching my fingers. And I want the top of the drill bit about level with the top of the vise. A little bit of material off one side and the other side, so I end up with something that looks like that. So I need 3 of them. So I have my 3 components, and I now Need to fit them around the scabbard. So I'm going to start with this one here, closing that up. So I've done this lots of times, so I kind of know what I'm chasing really. But I'll show you this when I'm done, but you can see the process. So I'm going to try and show you how it fits. So there it is. So now it's fitted, I'm just going to mark which one it is. Because otherwise I might lose it. So we now have these 3 pieces made, but I've got to shape them. So back to the grind room. So I'm going to decorate these as if they're scallop shells. So I'm just going to come in here, and we're going to get our radial fins, and we're going to end up with something like that. And there we have our little clamshell. Once that's had the heck polished out of it, it'll look great. 2 more. Just going to solder the fittings on. So they're in place, and I'm going to clean them up. So these are actually finished now, except for the suspension rings. So they're going to go into place and get soldered up. So they're done, and the last bit is the finial on the chape. The bottom of the chape is still not round. It is very much a mess. But it has allowed us to clean it up easily. You could clean it up obviously before, but now I'm just putting in a nice taper, gently tapping it, not too hard or you'll split it. And the bottom of the chape is round. So we can fit a turned finial in here now. So I have a piece of brass here, and obviously you can turn the finial whatever shape you want. But I'm just doing a little upstand that's going to fit into the bottom of this chape. So the finial's done, time to solder it on. So let's put it together and see what we've got. That is finished. Well, actually it's not finished, is it? Because we've got to dye it and belt it and show it with the sword. And that's it. 1 set of scabbard fittings for a lovely scabbard, now on the way to its new owner. But I hope you enjoyed the film. But if you like this kind of stuff, don't forget we've got 2 fantastic websites chocked full of things that are going to interest you, because if you like medieval weaponry, you're going to love those sites. So go check those out. We've also got a second YouTube channel, toggcutler.com, and that's like more niche content really, sort of book reviews, museum reviews, that kind of thing. And of course, we've got the Patreon as well, so if you want to support us there, it really helps, because we've got some big projects coming up later this summer. Anyway, see you again.